To Darcy's right was the Las Vegas Hotel and Casino. Its seaboard facade, oh sorry, also everything's made of seaweed. So seaboard is like kind of like a drywall made of seaweed, and then sea fiber is like a cloth made of seaweed. Its seaboard facade of the old Vegas Strip lit by yellow solvent-burning Klieg's. In front of its Romanesque entrance, a fountain spurted weak jets of semi-choreographed water while a stuffed tiger looked on with a perpetually open maw. To the left was the Big Top, its sea fiber roof once red, blue, and yellow, now oxblood gray and beige. Posters on its wall recommended, experience an Alaskan winter at 300 degrees below zero, and see real live polar bear from the wilds of the Yukon. No costumes, no tricks. Darcy had seen flyers for this show. The Big Top always had something Alaskan or polar going on this time of year when the weather was especially hot. A barker at the entrance, bundled in a parka and visibly soaked with sweat, shivered and shouted, "Brr, it's cold in here. Can you handle it? Can you?" Behind him stood 3 big bouncers with their arms crossed over their chests. Just east of the Big Top were the porn hawkers and freelance freaks, a woman with a thumb growing out of her shoulder, a macaw that did impressions of passers-by, the heavily advertised man with projectile sweat. East of them were the wedding chapels, their doorways belching forth floral scents and organ music, and beyond those were the casinos, and beyond those the whorehouses. Darcy had heard of girls being jumped into some of the seedier ones, but surely her mother was too old, and surely those stories were lies anyway, cooked up to keep girls from going out by themselves at night. She walked up to the Big Top entrance. The barker in the parka shouted "Brr" in her ear. "Do you know an Ansel Martinez?" Darcy asked him, "or Rodriguez?" This is the guy that she's looking for to help her find her mom. She was aware of how stupid it sounded that she didn't even know Ansel's full name, and the barker's blank stare was exactly what she expected. Then one of the bouncers spoke up. "I can take you to see Ansel," he said. The other 2 bouncers stepped forward. They were big. Their bellies were bright in their striped shirts. They made a box around Darcy. They bellied her past the main entrance, past the polar bear poster, and through a side door into a long, dim, narrow room. All along one wall were piled old-style black steamer trunks and brown seaboard boxes and dented bird cages, some with macaws still squawking in them. Mirrors lined the other wall, hung with feathered headdresses and cowboy hats and prairie bonnets and fake beards. 3 brown-skinned women were putting war paint on one another in front of a mirror. In another mirror, a man in the bottom half of a wrinkled gray elephant suit smoked a seaweed cigarette. At the end of the room was a curtain. From behind the curtain, Darcy could hear cheering. "Is Ansel in here?" Darcy asked. "You'll see him," said the bigger of the men. His shirt was striped red and yellow like peppered cheese food, and his 5 o'clock shadow appeared to be painted on. "Hey, Sunshine," he called, "we got a good one." A tall and skinny woman in a yellow flowered dress turned to look at Darcy. Her skin was brown and pockmarked, and her hair was oily, and her wrists stuck 3 inches out of her cuffs. She was the opposite of the little milky prairie girl on the World Experience's wall. Her mouth was painted orangey red. Her eyes were messily lined with black. They were small and proud and penetrating. "She's too skinny, Tug," she said to the man in the striped shirt. "Good one for what?" Darcy asked. Sunshine rummaged in an overfilled trunk, then held a fur coat open in front of Darcy. "Come on," she said. "What is this?" Darcy asked. "I'm looking for Ansel." "If you do this," Sunshine said, "I'll take you to him." "Do what? I don't want to do anything." "Look, either you leave now or you put on the costume and do the Eskimo dance, and then you can meet Ansel." The fur smelled like sweat and rancid cheese food, and Darcy didn't want to do any sort of dance in front of a bunch of people. She had no way of knowing if Ansel could even help her, but he was the only lead she had. If she gave up now, all she could do was go back to the apartment and wait, and the waiting would drive her insane. She slid her arms into the sleeves, pulled the hot hood up over her head. Then Sunshine handed her a pair of padded pants and heavy fur-lined boots with holes in the soles. Finally, she shoved several pillows down the front of the coat to make Darcy look fat. Loud, tinny music came piercing through the curtain into the dressing room, along with the sound of applause. "Time to go," said Sunshine. "Don't forget to shiver like you're cold." "If I was really an Eskimo, why would I be cold?" Sunshine didn't answer. Instead, she led Darcy past the elephant, past a girl in a cowboy hat practicing gun twirls, past a man with a fake beard trying to put a dress on a monkey, through an open curtain and out into very bright light. She knew she was on stage only because of the screaming. The white light shone straight into her eyes, and she could see nothing except the wisps of fur around her face. Next to her, Sunshine was calling, in a strange accent not her own. "Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Inga, the real-life Eskimo." The crowd's voice rose up to meet Sunshine's. Whistles and whoops stuck up out of the general yell. Someone yelled, "Take off the coat!" Sunshine disappeared, and a man's voice from downstage shouted, "And now Inga will perform a traditional dance from her home in the frozen north." Darcy's vision cleared enough for her to see a round, short man in suspenders and a weird, long coat pointing up at her. She stood very still for a moment, vehemently not dancing, and then she ran to where she hoped the curtain was. The man Sunshine called Tug was standing there, his arms crossed over his chest. He gave her a simple warning look. She turned and ran across the stage in the other direction, ducked behind a seaboard cut out of an igloo, and came up short against a wall. The crowd began to boo. Darcy heard something wet splatter onto the stage. "Looks like Inga's not in the mood for dancing tonight," said the man with the suspenders. "Let's give her a little incentive." The crowd screamed again. Darcy wished she had something to throw back at them. She thought about killing the man with the suspenders. She thought about driving an ice pick down into his head. Instead, she took the fur coat off and threw it on the ground. The pillows slid away from her body and fell to the ground with a schlump. Then Tug opened the curtain and some smoke came out. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man in suspenders began. Something was moving in the smoke. It was moving slowly and making gurgling sounds. Tug reached back and hit it, and then it was charging toward Darcy, snarling. The man in suspenders shouted, "The famous polar bear!" Darcy was running. She was running across the stage, and the bear was running after her, its steps heavy, its paws clacking on the boards. She could smell its body. It smelled like jellyfish and urine. Its growl was higher and angrier than a dog's. It sounded like it was hurt somewhere inside, like it wanted to hurt something else. She hid behind the igloo, and then it came at her from around the side, and she saw that it was covered with white paint that had worn away in places, exposing the black fur underneath. She put her hands up in front of her face, and it stopped for a second, just inches from her. It made a sound in its throat that was not a growl. It was more like a sigh. She looked at the bear's eyes and saw dark ooze shining around them. This bear was sick, and it was tired, and it was trapped, and it was humiliated, and Darcy was not going to be like this bear. She ran again, but this time she ran straight forward and jumped off the stage and landed in a white pool of pure pain.